So let's talk about leadership polarities. Let's talk about how polarities work inside of me. These aren't biological polarities. These are ones that I don't have a biofeedback system to help me tell me when to go from one to the other. One of the things that I know about myself is that I've always had a set of really core leadership strengths. And they were things like I'm always organized, highly disciplined, and I am not afraid of a risk. These are things that have served me well and gotten me to where I am today. And I believed for years that this was the way to lead. What I found was that being organized all by itself, I could in fact become rigid. And in my quest to be disciplined, so highly disciplined, that I had actually become humorless, lost my humor in life. And also as a risk taker, I found myself, and I can tell you story after story, where I would find myself working around the country where I was really over my head. It sounded like a great idea when I heard about it, but when time came, I realized I was really out of my league. So in 2001, I started looking at my values, at my strengths from this polarity perspective. And so instead of being organized and then rigid, I realized that I needed to be organized and flexible, that I needed to have both. That while it was essential to be disciplined, I also needed to be playful and have fun with others and have fun at work. Of course, risk-taking is best served when there's a good, cautious dose of reality. So what I learned here was about the power of the word and, A-N-D. It's such a little word, and it's a little three-syllable word, but if you're from the South like I am, I have the ability to make it a three-syllable word like and. And for me to recognize that I needed to be organized and flexible, I needed to be disciplined and playful, I needed to be a risk taker, and I needed to be cautious. All these things have caused my level of performance, not only in my professional life, in my personal life, to go to a performance level that I never even imagined possible. So let's come back and take a second and look at your own leadership polarities or leadership preferences. Through Polarity Management Associates, a group of us from across the world that study polarities together, these are pretty much the 10 common polarities that leaders need to really be conscious of and manage well over time. So what I'm going to do is ask you to take your test out, look at the items that you circled, and then look specifically at the items where you put that asterisk by the circle. Anywhere you have an asterisk by that circle, that means that you, not I, that you declared a strong preference of one value over the other. So anywhere you've got that asterisk means that you are potentially vulnerable, I say potentially vulnerable, to the strengths from that particular value becoming your weakness, because you so strongly prefer one over the other that you are in fact likely to neglect the other pole and allow your strengths from your preference to turn into your weakness. It's because you have a blind spot about the benefits and the positive results that you can get from that other pole, that other value that you didn't have a strong preference about or that you didn't really see the value in at all. So now you're probably asking, well, how about the ones where I didn't have an asterisk? What that generally means is that somewhere along the line, and I'm sure you didn't get on this call today without having lots of experience and gaining lots of earned wisdom, that just means that you are probably, through your own earned wisdom and your intuition, managing to get the best of both over time, that you can move fluidly from one to the other as the situation, in fact, may dictate. So if you're going to embrace polarity thinking and polarity mapping, which I'll introduce in just a minute, it would be prudent to look at those where you place the asterisk in terms of where you have a blind spot and where you can make the most improvement in your own leadership performance. So, polarity principles. There are two alternatives that are interdependent, and you can only focus on one pole or value for so long before you are in fact required to focus on the other. Again, it's like inhaling and exhaling. It's like activity and rest. It's just that we don't have that biofeedback system to tell us when to move from one to the other. What's important to remember here is that all polarities, regardless of the size of the system, whether the system is us as a human being or us as a leader or us as groups, that polarities are indestructible no matter how strong your preference. You will always need to get some of both over time. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the true test of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two contradictory ideas at the same time, to use the positive two different points of view. So I'll ask you, what do you see in this picture? This is something that came out in the 1960s. It's called Figure Ground, and I'm sure there's some of you saying, I've seen that before. Others may say, I see two faces, or they say, I see a goblet. The fact is that what we're going to talk about today is polarity mapping, and it helps you see both. The genius of Barry Johnson's work in 1975 was that he came up with a mapping methodology to help make these principles and polarity perspectives visible to folks that ordinarily might have blind spots. I call the polarity map a wisdom organizer. It helps provide a container for you to understand the complexity that's associated with leadership. What we do in polarity management and polarity mapping is we give you a step-by-step approach to help you see your strengths, because it's essential to see what makes you successful and to help you supplement them. This is an example of a partial polarity map. This is called a motivational value point of view, where you have a higher purpose, where you want to manage to get the best of both poles. But in this case, I have a strong value of one over the other, a strong preference. So what I see and what I prefer is I see the positives that are associated with my strong preference, and I see some negatives that I want to avoid, all in the name of trying to avoid some sort of deeper concern. So that's called a motivational value point of view. So it's a one-sided point of view. What I know is that when I have a really strong preference, that I actually have a missing point of view as a leader, that there is some positive results that I can get from this other value, this other preference in terms of being a leader, and there are also some different negatives that I want to avoid. What I've learned is that a strength becomes a weakness without ongoing integration. Here we look at the two viewpoints consolidated into one polarity map. So the left diagonal, which is the brown, and the right diagonal, which is the blue, we get to see the whole picture. We get to see ourselves more completely so our strengths don't turn into our weaknesses. So just let me explain this to you, that if we look in the upper left-hand quadrant, because I value these positive results, and we look down to the bottom right-hand quadrant, and I try hard to avoid some negative results, then the upper right-hand quadrant in the blue is that I miss out on these positive results and end up in the bottom left-hand quadrant where I'm getting negative results. And that's how my strengths turn into weakness. What I value, in fact, can get me in trouble. The key here is ongoing balance, to get the best of the motivational value that you prefer and to get that missing interdependent value that perhaps you've not seen before. In my book, Power Surge, A Conduit for Enlightened Leadership, we joined Morgan and Hendricks, who is an executive with electric utility somewhere on the southeastern coast near a beautiful and historic city. You might imagine where that is. And her boss is up and died in the middle of hurricane season, and she's about to approach a crisis of a Category 4 hurricane coming ashore in just 6 days. And Morgan believed that it was essential in an electric utility for a female who was breaking the glass ceiling to be humble. If she had taken that test today with us earlier, she would probably put 5 or 6 asterisks by humility. She believed that was the way, in fact, to effectively lead, because she saw that she would be seen as approachable, that she'd have a really fabulous environment for people to work in, and people would be comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas. And also, she would avoid, rightly so, being seen as arrogant, being seen as closed or disrespectful, and being unilateral in her decision-making. Right? So that's how she approached guiding this utility through a very, very stressful and very much a critical time. What she missed, though, was the importance of balancing humility with its interdependent value or preference of competence. Because of this blind spot was she was unable to see that it was important to have a presence as a role model, being visible to people and being viewed as competent and being comfortable sharing her own ideas. So unfortunately what happened to her was she actually got these negative results. She ended up having no presence. She was viewed as lacking competence. People were really going around her, and she was in fact taken advantage of in the story of Power Surge because she didn't provide the needed direction. So what happens later in the story after the hurricane and the restoration of electric power and her own power, Morgan learns how to be an effective leader and to avoid being an ineffective leader by getting the best of both humility that it has to offer and being able to go into what she'd never seen before, which were the very different yet essential positives of confidence, while at the same time avoiding being unsure as well as avoiding being arrogant. I think it's important to note that if you look at the area of the map where the infinity loop covers it, you'll notice that most of the areas in the positives of both and very little in the negative. And that's what we're looking for from ongoing awareness and improved transformational leadership, is that you're getting the best of both over time and not getting the negatives of either. The other thing that we've learned about polarities and understanding them and tapping the best of both is that you have the opportunity to create a virtuous cycle. And by that I mean the spiraling arrows upward will enable you to go at a higher level of performance than ever before. Conversely, there are vicious cycles that can be created if we stick to our own preferred value and continue over long periods of time to neglect the interdependent value that is essential. One of the things that we know is that you will in fact get the worst of both over time and head into that deeper fear. Sherry, I want to say that it's really been a pleasure to speak to the group today, and certainly want to turn it over to you to see what questions you and others may have or comments about how they've in fact used polarity management and polarity thinking in their lives.
Oh, Margaret, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and your thoughts with us today. I really appreciate it.